The glittering lights of Abuja twinkled through the window as Adaobi stared blankly at her reflection. Her heart raced, but not from excitement, rather, from the pressure she could feel tightening around her. Across from her, Charles knelt down, his hand outstretched with a ring that seemed to shine brighter than the stars outside. He was everything her parents wanted for her: successful, wealthy, and most importantly, connected in the political world. His family had deep roots in Nigerian politics, and their union would strengthen the political power her father had been craving for years. But Adaobi's mind was elsewhere. A flash of another face crossed her thoughts: David, the man she had met during her NGO work in Gwarinpa. He was humble, with no grand political aspirations, just a heart full of dreams and a love so pure that it made her feel alive in a way Charles never could. As Charles waited for her answer, she could hear her mother's voice echoing in her mind: "This marriage will secure our family's future, Adaobi. You must say yes." The weight of her family's expectations sat heavily on her shoulders, and her heart tore in two. Should she follow her heart or fulfill her duty to the family that had given her everything? Adaobi sat at a cafe in Gwarinpa, her hand absent-mindedly stirring her tea. Across from her, David smiled, his eyes twinkling with joy as he spoke about a new project he was working on for underprivileged children. The warmth in his voice, the passion in his soul, it was everything she loved about him. With him, there were no pretenses, no political agendas, just two people bound by love. Yet, as much as she cherished these stolen moments, a sense of dread loomed over her. "What's wrong, Adaobi?" David asked, leaning forward, concern etched on his face. She opened her mouth to speak but hesitated. How could she tell him about the proposal? About the political game her family was playing, with her at the center. "It's nothing," she whispered, trying to force a smile. But David wasn't convinced. "Adaobi, you know you can tell me anything," he pressed, taking her hand gently. She wanted to tell him everything, to run away with him and leave the world of politics behind. But that wasn't possible. Not yet. Not when so much was at stake. I need more time," she finally said, pulling her hand away. David frowned, but nodded, respecting her need for space. But deep down, Adaobi knew time was running out. Adaobi returned home to find her father, Chief Okeke, sitting in his study. He was a towering figure in Nigerian politics, feared and respected in equal measure. His stern gaze landed on her the moment she stepped through the door. "Have you given Charles an answer?" he asked, his voice carrying the weight of expectation. Adaobi hesitated, shifting on her feet. "I'm still thinking about it," she replied, her heart pounding. Her father rose from his chair and walked toward her, his eyes narrowing. "There is nothing to think about, Adaobi. This marriage isn't just about you. It's about the family. It's about securing our future in the political landscape of this country. You must not be selfish." His words stung, but they weren't new. Her family had always seen her as a tool in their political game. Love had no place in their world, and David, with his simple life, would never be accepted. "I understand, Father," she whispered, but deep inside, she felt a growing resistance, a fire that refused to be extinguished. Days turned into weeks, and Adaobi found herself growing more distant from Charles. Their conversations were stiff, centered around politics, power, and influence. Every time Charles tried to draw her in with grand plans for the future, her mind drifted to David. David, who cared nothing for status or wealth. David, who understood her in ways no one else did. One evening, as they sat together on a terrace overlooking the Abuja skyline, Charles took her hand. "I know you're hesitant, Adaobi, but this marriage will bring our families together in a way that will shape the future of Nigeria. Together, we will be unstoppable," he said, his tone filled with ambition. Adaobi forced a smile but said nothing. "Unstoppable, yes, but at what cost? The next day, she met David in a quiet park away from the city. His face lit up the moment he saw her, and without a word, he pulled her into an embrace. "I missed you," he whispered into her hair. Adaobi closed her eyes, breathing him in. In that moment, she felt safe, free from the suffocating world of politics that awaited her at home. But could their love survive the storm that was brewing? Adaobi sat with her mother, Lady Okeke, in the sitting room, watching her arrange expensive trinkets on the mantelpiece. Her mother had always been the perfect politician's wife, poised, elegant, and ruthlessly strategic. "You know how much this marriage means to your father, don't you?" her mother said, her voice soft but firm. "He has sacrificed everything to climb to the top, and this alliance with Charles's family will solidify our position." Adaobi nodded but remained silent. "You're not just marrying a man, Adaobi," her mother continued, "you're marrying into a legacy, one that will shape the future of this country. Don't let love cloud your judgment." The words struck deep, but Adaobi's heart ached at the thought of losing David. Could she really give up on love for her family's ambitions? Her mother seemed to sense her hesitation. "Adaobi, love fades. Power is forever." Later that evening, Adaobi couldn't keep the secret any longer. She met David under the cover of darkness at their favorite cafe in Gwarimpa. The place was nearly empty, the air heavy with tension. "I need to tell you something," she began, her voice shaking. David's brow furrowed as he leaned closer. "What is it, Ada?" She swallowed hard before continuing. "Charles proposed. My family wants me to marry him for political reasons." David's face fell, but he said nothing, waiting for her to finish. "I haven't given them an answer because I love you, David. But my family will never accept you. They want me to marry for power, not love." David reached for her hand across the table. "I don't care about your family's plans, Adaobi. I love you, and we can figure this out together." His words were full of hope, but Adaobi knew the reality was much darker. Could their love truly withstand the pressure from her family? The next morning, her father called a family meeting. Adaobi knew what was coming, but that didn't make the moment any easier. Her father's eyes were sharp as he spoke. "We've waited long enough, Adaobi. You need to make your decision. Charles or nothing. The wedding must happen within the next few months." Adaobi's heart raced. She opened her mouth to speak, but her father raised a hand. "There is no room for argument here. If you do not accept this marriage, you will lose everything, your home, your family, and our support. It's your choice." Her mother looked at her with a cold, calculating gaze, as if daring her to defy the family's will. Adaobi felt the walls closing in. Her love for David was strong, but the weight of her family's expectations was crushing. Could she risk losing everything for a love that might not survive the battles ahead? Adaobi spent sleepless nights wondering what to do. Her heart belonged to David, but her family's ultimatum echoed in her mind. Could she really walk away from the life of privilege she had always known? And more importantly, could David handle the political storm that was coming their way if she chose him? During another secret meeting, David sensed her inner turmoil. "You're scared, Adaobi. I get it. But I need to know, do you see a future with me? Or are you going to choose them?" David's question hit her hard. She loved him, but she had to be honest with herself. Could she really leave her family behind? She avoided his gaze and whispered, "I don't know, David. I don't know." Adaobi's family wasted no time. A few days later, at a grand political fundraiser, her father publicly announced the engagement between his daughter and Charles. Adaobi stood next to Charles, her smile forced as cameras flashed around them. David wasn't there, but she could feel his absence like a weight on her chest. As the night wore on, Charles whispered in her ear, "You did the right thing, Adaobi. Together, we rule Abuja." His words made her stomach churn. She felt trapped, like a puppet in her father's game. But deep down, she knew the real battle was just beginning. Would she have the strength to fight for her heart, or would she surrender to the world of politics and power that threatened to consume her? David was devastated when he saw the news. Adaobi tried to explain the situation, telling him that the engagement was just a formality, but David didn't believe her. "You chose them, Ada. You chose power over love," he said, his voice filled with pain. Adaobi's heart broke as she watched him walk away, but what could she do? The weight of her family's expectations hung over her like a dark cloud, and for the first time, she wondered if love truly was enough. Adaobi could barely focus on anything after David walked away. Days turned into weeks, but the sting of his absence lingered like a scar on her soul. She went through the motions of wedding preparations with Charles, her body present but her mind adrift. The engagement had been publicly celebrated, and now every step toward the wedding felt like walking deeper into a prison. Charles, on the other hand, seemed more energized than ever. He reveled in the political attention their union was bringing, constantly talking about their future as Abuja's power couple. But to Adaobi, his ambition was suffocating. Late at night, alone in her room, she would think of David, his gentle touch, his warm smile, the simplicity of his love. Was it too late to undo the damage? Could love still win? One rainy afternoon, while Adaobi sat by the window, lost in thought, a knock came at her door. It was one of the house staff, handing her a letter. "From a man named David," the woman whispered before leaving. Adaobi's heart skipped a beat. With shaking hands, she opened the envelope and read, "Ada, I can't stay away any longer. I need to see you. Meet me at our usual spot tomorrow at noon. Please, don't leave me in the dark. Love, David." Her hands trembled as she held the letter. Could she face him after everything? But she knew she had no choice. She had to see him. The next day, Adaobi arrived at the cafe in Gwarimpa, her heart pounding with anxiety. She spotted David sitting in the corner, looking up the moment she walked in. His eyes were filled with a mixture of hope and hurt. Without a word, she sat down across from him. "Why are you here, Ada?" he asked softly. "Why did you come?" "I had to see you," she whispered. "David, I've been living in a nightmare. I never wanted any of this." David leaned forward, his voice pained. "Then why didn't you fight? Why did you let them push you into this engagement?" Tears welled up in Adaobi's eyes. "Because I didn't know how to fight them, David. My family, they've controlled my entire life. I felt powerless." David shook his head, frustrated. "Ada, you're stronger than you think. You don't have to be a pawn in their political games. You can choose your own path." The words hung between them like a lifeline, but Adaobi still didn't know if she was ready to grab hold. After her meeting with David, Adaobi felt a glimmer of hope she hadn't felt in months. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she didn't have to marry Charles. But the thought of defying her family still terrified her. The consequences would be severe: disownment, shame, and the loss of everything she'd ever known. But something in David's words struck a chord within her. Could she really be brave enough to fight for her own happiness? That evening, as she lay in bed, Adaobi realized that she needed to make a decision. She couldn't keep living in this limbo, torn between two worlds. It was time to choose. Adaobi decided that she needed to confront Charles about her feelings. She couldn't go through with the marriage if her heart wasn't in it, and he deserved to know the truth. That night, during one of their many dinner dates, she gathered her courage. "Charles, I need to talk to you about something important," she began, her voice steady but her palms sweaty. Charles looked up from his meal, curious. "What's on your mind?" "I can't marry you," she blurted out. The words hung in the air like a bomb. Charles blinked, clearly taken aback. "What? Why? Is this about David?" Adeobi's heart sank. "Yes, but it's more than that. I don't love you, Charles. I never have. And it's not fair to either of us to pretend otherwise." For the first time, Charles's face darkened with something other than political ambition, anger. "Do you realize what you're saying? Do you know what this will cost your family?" "I do," she said quietly. "But I can't live a lie." Charles's calm demeanor shattered, and he stood up abruptly, knocking over his wine glass. "You're making a huge mistake, Adeobi. You're willing to throw away your family's legacy for some naive idea of love. You don't know what's at stake here." "I do," Adeobi repeated, though her voice wavered. Charles stepped closer, his voice low and threatening. "You'll regret this. I can make things very difficult for you, Adeobi. Your family won't protect you when I'm through with them. Think about that before you make any final decisions." Adeobi swallowed hard, fear curling in her stomach. She hadn't expected this side of Charles, but it only made her more certain that she couldn't marry him. Whatever the cost, she had to be true to herself. When Adeobi broke the news to her parents, her father's face turned stone cold. He didn't shout or yell. He simply said, "If you walk away from this marriage, you walk away from this family. There will be no reconciliation. You'll be on your own." Her mother's expression was a mixture of disappointment and fury. "How could you do this, Adeobi? How could you throw away everything we've worked for?" Adeobi took a deep breath, her heart heavy but resolute. "I can't marry someone I don't love. I'm sorry, but I have to live my life for myself, not for political gain." Her father's eyes hardened. "Then get out. Don't come back." After being disowned by her family, Adeobi found herself standing outside the gate of the only home she had ever known, with nothing but a small suitcase in her hand. The weight of her decision hit her like a wave, and she almost collapsed from the grief of it all. She was alone now, truly alone. No family, no support, no safety net. But as terrifying as it was, Adeobi also felt a strange sense of freedom. For the first time in her life, she had made a choice entirely for herself. But the road ahead was uncertain, and she had no idea where to turn. Adeobi's first instinct was to go to David. When she knocked on his door that evening, he opened it and immediately pulled her into a tight embrace. "You came back," he whispered into her hair, relief washing over his face. "I left everything behind," she murmured. "My family, the engagement, everything." David pulled back to look into her eyes. "You're not alone, Ada. We'll figure this out together." For the first time in weeks, Adeobi felt a sense of peace. She had lost her family, but she hadn't lost herself. And with David by her side, maybe, just maybe, she could rebuild her life. The following weeks were hard. Adeobi had to adjust to a new reality, one without her family's wealth, status, or influence. She found a small apartment on the outskirts of Abuja and began searching for work. The lifestyle change was drastic, but David was with her every step of the way. They would sit on the floor of her sparsely furnished apartment, eating takeout and laughing about the future they wanted to build together. In those quiet moments, Adeobi realized that she had made the right decision. She had chosen love, and though the path wasn't easy, it was worth it. News of Adeobi's decision to call off the wedding spread quickly through Abuja's elite circles. Her family was furious and humiliated. Chief Okeke's political enemies wasted no time in exploiting the scandal to undermine his influence. Headlines read, "Chief Okeke's daughter rejects power for love," and the media reveled in the drama. Adeobi's parents were publicly silent, but privately, she knew they were plotting their next move. Her father would not let this blow go unanswered. Adaobi braced herself for the storm she knew was coming. Chief Okeke's political rivals seized the opportunity to weaken his position. They painted him as a man who couldn't even control his own family, let alone lead the country. The loss of the alliance with Charles's family only added fuel to the fire. Charles himself, nursing his bruised ego, began leaking damaging information about the Okeke family's financial dealings. The Okeke family's political empire was starting to crumble, and Adaobi couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. She had never wanted to hurt her family, but her decision had set off a chain reaction that she hadn't anticipated. As the political backlash grew, so did the pressure on David. He was no longer just a man in love, he was now the target of scrutiny from powerful people who saw him as a threat to their plans. David's job at the NGO became increasingly difficult as donations started to dry up, and the organization struggled to stay afloat. Adaobi could see the stress taking its toll on him, but David remained steadfast. "I knew this would be hard, Ada," he said one night as they sat together on the couch. "But I'm not going to back down. We'll get through this." One evening, David took Adaobi to their favorite park, the same place where they had shared so many quiet moments together in the past. As they sat on a bench overlooking the city, David pulled out a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple, beautiful ring. "Adaobi, I don't have wealth or power to offer you. But I do have love. Will you marry me?" David asked, his voice filled with sincerity. Adaobi's heart swelled with emotion. She had lost so much, but she had gained something far more precious. Without hesitation, she whispered, "Yes." Adaobi and David's wedding was nothing like the grand affair her family had once envisioned for her. It was a small, intimate ceremony with only a handful of friends and loved ones present. There were no lavish decorations, no media coverage, just two people deeply in love, committing to spend their lives together. As they exchanged vows, Adaobi felt an overwhelming sense of peace. She had chosen love over power, and in that moment, she knew she had made the right decision. Life after the wedding wasn't easy. Adaobi and David faced financial challenges, especially with the ongoing backlash from her family's political scandal. But they faced every obstacle together, their love growing stronger with each passing day. Adaobi found work at a non-profit organization, using her skills to help underprivileged communities in Abuja. David continued his work at the NGO, and together, they found purpose in helping others. Though their lives were far from the luxury Adaobi had once known, they were content. Months passed, and Adaobi hadn't heard from her family. She knew her father's political career had suffered because of her decision, and she wondered if they would ever forgive her. One day, she received a letter from her younger brother, Chike. "Ada, I miss you. Things aren't the same without you here. I wish things hadn't turned out this way, but I understand why you did what you did. Maybe one day, we can all be a family again. Please take care of yourself." Tears filled Adaobi's eyes as she read the letter. She missed her family too, but she knew that reconciliation might never come. Still, the letter gave her hope that maybe, one day, things could be different. Meanwhile, Charles's political career was unraveling. His attempt to ruin the Okeke family had backfired, and his own shady dealings were brought to light. Corruption scandals, embezzlement charges, and political enemies began to close in on him. The man who had once been so full of ambition and power now found himself facing the possibility of prison. Adaobi watched from a distance, feeling a strange mixture of relief and sadness. Charles had been a part of her life for so long, but now, his fall from grace felt like the closing of a chapter she was ready to leave behind. As the years passed, Adaobi and David built a life filled with love, compassion, and purpose. They continued their work in the non-profit sector, helping to improve the lives of others in their community. Though they didn't have the wealth or power that her family once craved, they had something far more valuable in each other. Adaobi often thought about her family, wondering if they would ever be able to reconcile. But she had found peace in knowing that she had made the right choice for herself, and that was enough. One day, as Adaobi and David sat together on their front porch, watching the sunset, Adaobi reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. She had given up everything, her family, her status, her wealth, for love. But in doing so, she had gained a life of purpose, fulfillment, and happiness. "I wouldn't change a thing," she said softly, resting her head on David's shoulder. David smiled and kissed her forehead. "Neither would I." In the end, Adaobi had learned that true power didn't come from wealth or political status. It came from the courage to follow her heart, even when the world told her otherwise. And in that courage, she had found everything she had ever needed.